Shape keys are a great way to bring life to your model's facial expressions, and they can make your lip syncs much more expressive too. Because you are sculpting the expressions directly onto the model, you can have much more control than you would if you're using a pure bone rig. In this video, I'll go through how to set up your shape keys, and then show you how to integrate them into your rig so that you can use them with your animated characters. Let's get started. Okay, our first step is going to be to bind our model to our rig. You can see I've created a custom rig here. This is because it's a little bit easier to demonstrate this with a custom rig. It's possible to do this with systems like Rigify and AutoRig Pro, but because both of those have a generation step, it's a lot easier to just demonstrate this when you have more complete control over the bones. But we'll go into those systems a little bit later. Anyhow, we have several objects. We have our skin object, of course, and we also have a tongue and a teeth that we're going to be dealing with too. The eyes have already been bound to the model, so we're just going to ignore those for now. But you can set those up the way you usually do. And let's put that back on the model, and we're going to select the skin, select the rig, shift select the rig, press Control P, and bind with automatic weights. And right away we have our skin attached. If we go into pose mode, you can see we can now move our skin around. You might notice that the jaw is deforming a little bit though. We don't want that, so let's right click to undo that. We're going to go into side mode by pressing numpad 3, and let's go back into object. Select the skin. What we're going to do is select all the weights, and we're going to make sure that these are weighted so that they only affect the head bone here, which is the only bone that we want to care about. If we go into X-ray mode and wireframe mode, we can then select over here to edit. And you can see I've already selected them, but let's just do that again. I'll press Control A to Alt A to erase that. We have lasso selected there, so if we can just go around like this and select those vertices, we now have just that group selected. In fact, let's make an extra vertex group just so that we can hold on to that. Let's call that face selection, and assign those vertices to that group, just so if we ever lose those vertices, we can get them back pretty quickly just by selecting that group again and going to select, and that brings them all back. Okay, now the reason why we did this is if we come back here into object mode and turn off X-ray and go into that mode. If we select the rig and then shift select the skin and come down here to weight paint mode, you'll see that when we weight painted everything, it didn't give us the weights we wanted. If we just go up slowly here, you can see that the eye, the right eye, the left eye, and the neck are all having significant contributions to our face here, and we don't want that. We want only the head bone to be contributing to the vertices, contributing to the weights. And you can see right now it is a little less than perfect. So in order to better see where our weights are painted, we're going to come up here to the little barbell and click on active. And what that's going to do is it's going to replace the blue with black where it is completely zero, because often when you're painting weights, it can be difficult to tell when something is close to zero versus is exactly zero. And this is really helpful for knowing when something is exactly zero, which is what we're going to be looking for here. Okay, so let's, in weight paint mode, let's click on vertices so we can select vertices. Let's come back down here to that face selection group that we got earlier. Let's select all those, So we know they're selected, and let's just go up the list here, and we're going to want to remove this selection of vertices wherever we see it in the face. Okay, so there we are at the right eye. We don't want any vertices there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to make sure this vertex selection is on. We're going to go to weights, and we're going to set weight. And that's going to set all of that to black, because the weight value here, I mean, this can be 1 when we're painting a positive weight, but we want that to be 0 because we're going to be taking away weights. We want all these to be 0. So you can see we just successfully took away all the eye right weights. If we go up again, we are on eye left, and there's none there. Okay, head is, we'll get back to head later. And neck, we do not want any neck weights there, so let's go to weights, set weight. Okay, those are all 0 now. And neck 2, we do not want that neck bone contributing either, so weights, set weight to 0. And let's see if anything else is affecting our head. Okay, we don't, nothing else by the look of it, except for the head bone itself, which we do want, but we'll get back to that a little bit later. Okay, that looks like it. And this is not actually a bone, this is just that, the group itself. So let's go back up to head. And now we're going to set the weight up here to 1, and we're going to set weights to, we're going to do set weight. And now because the weight is 1, that set that to red. And let's come down here to the bottom here. We can smooth this out a little bit in weight paint mode. Let's get the blur brush down there and smooth that down a little bit. And this is just to sort of smooth out this neck area a little bit, so the cut isn't quite so harsh. But that is probably the easiest way to make sure that you've got only the head bone affecting your facial area. Okay, and now that we're done with the weights there, if we go back into pose mode and we move that bone around, you can see that our chin is no longer distorting when we move the neck. Okay, now that we've attached the skin, now let's attach the tongue and teeth. Let's hide the skin for now. I'm going to select it and press H for hide. Then I'm going to select the 2 teeth objects and the tongue object, and finally our rig, and press Ctrl P, and we're going to attach it with empty groups. And what that means is that instead of automatically weighting it according to the rig, everything starts at 0, which is what we want for every bone except for the head bone. Let me select the rig, select the top teeth there, and go into weight paint mode. And you can see every single bone here is set to 0, which is as we want it to be, except for 1. We want the head bone to be red, or to be 1. So make sure the head bone's selected. Select the paint tool. Make sure the weight is at 1 here. We're going to get the vertex selection and press A to make sure all of these vertices are selected. Then weights and set weight. And we've just set all the weights for the head bone to 1. Let's do that with the lower teeth as well. Going to select the rig and the lower teeth. Back into weight paint mode. Let's select our head bone. Right there. Press A to make sure everything's been selected. And then weights, set weight, and that's now 1. Okay, we have one more to go. Let's select the tongue, or the rig, and then the tongue. and back into weight paint mode. Let's press A to select everything, make sure we have the head bone. And weights, set weight. Alright, so these have all now been weighted to the head bone. And if we select our rig again and go into pose mode, if we rotate the head bone around, you can see that the tongue and the teeth come with it. And if we go back into object mode, unhide our skin, and let's make our rig visible again. Back in pose mode. You can now see that when we rotate it around, everything comes with the skin. Alright, time for a shape key. Let's prepare the skin. Let's turn off in front so that the armature isn't distracting us. And let's get a second view over here. Let's open a second viewport. That looks good. And let's get a front view. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to select the skin, and then we're going to come down here to the Data tab. And notice the shape keys is currently empty. In order to create our first shape key, first we have to press the plus sign. And the first thing it creates here is the basis shape. This is the neutral shape. You always have to have one of these so that Blender knows what the neutral pose is. Once you have your basis shape in there, you can start creating your shape key by pressing the plus sign to get a new key entry. Let's say we're going to manipulate the eyebrows here. So let's call this eyebrow lift. .L, because we're going to do it on the left side. And let's go into sculpt mode. And before I go any further, the weight of this eyebrow lift is at 0. That means it's not going to show up. If you want to be able to edit this, you're going to have to set this to 1. And you can also set it down there in the value. It does the exact same thing. And so we're in sculpt mode, and notice that symmetry is also off. So if I edit this side of the model, it's not going to affect that side. So because we're going to lift the eyebrow, we're in elastic deform. Just going to push the brow up a little bit, as if they're reacting in surprise. And it's as simple as that. We now have our shape key of the left eyebrow lifted. And if we wiggle the value, we can send it back down to the neutral pose. Looks like we moved the bottom 2. Let's correct for that. Okay, maybe not perfect, but it gets the point across. What if we wanted to have a second shape key on this? Like, let's say we wanted the eyebrow to come down. Well, we can also do that by adding another shape key. Let's call this eyebrow lower .L, because this also can be for the left side of the model. And this time we're going to set that value back to 1, so it's fully activated. And now we're going to look like she's sort of grimacing, sort of angry, sort of glaring at us. Okay, and that will do. And now we can wiggle this back and forth to turn on and off the shape key. And yeah, it's as simple as that. And you can keep going for all the different eye positions that you want. We can also make a duplicate of this if we want to lower the other side as well. We can use the menu here to create a duplicate, so just plus new shape from mix. That just makes a copy of it. And let's put that one back to 0. And put that one to 1. Now you see it's still on the left side. If we want to transfer it to the right side, we can take that down arrow and mirror shape key. And now it's on the other side. So let's call this eyebrow lower right. So if we manipulate this one, the right eye changes. And if we manipulate this one, the left eye changes, and we can get a sinister stare at us. And we can do the same thing with the first key. Let's make a duplicate of that. Let's call this eyebrow lift. Okay, and because this is a duplicate, it's going to start off doing the same thing as the previous eyebrow lift. Oh, when we duplicated it, this was not at 1. Let's do that one more time. Eyebrow lift L, let's put that up to 1. Now let's duplicate it. New shape for mix. This is a combination of everything that is currently active. Let's put that back down to 0. This guy goes up to 1, and we're going to mirror that to the other side. And now we have a nice surprised shape and a nice glaring shape for our eyes. Mouth shape keys can be even trickier because not only do you have to take the lips into account, but you also have to think about the jaw and the tongue and the teeth. But it starts out the same way that we started out with the previous shape keys. Just make sure your skin is selected. Come down here to the shape keys and press the plus sign. And then we're going to name the shape key M, A, E, I to fit in with the first slot in our mouth chart over here. And let's set the weight to 1. And now we are going to edit this in edit mode. And you can see I've already pre-selected some vertices here. We are going to open the mouth by putting a cursor there for the pivot point. Come up here and make sure you are rotating around the 3D cursor. Now if I press the R key and move the mouse, you can see our mouth has opened slightly. That might be a little bit too much. Let's make it a little slighter, and there we go. There is the start of our mouth position. Maybe a little bit more. Okay, now we can go in and sculpt this. Let's make sure that symmetry is enabled. And I'm going to hold down the Shift key and just sort of tap around here to smooth out the under the chin area. And we're also going to need to smooth that area just a little bit, and of course the edges of the mouth. But we're also going to want to shape this into that A shape. So something like that. That looks horrifying. But you can just push and pull this as much as you need to be able to get the mouth position that you need. Okay, that's a good start. So now that we have the lips in the right place, we need to get the teeth in the right place, because you can see we have got those up way too high at the moment. So let's go back into object mode and let's select our teeth. And we're going to need to add some shaped keys for our teeth. So let's press the button to get our basis, which is our neutral pose. One more for our shape key. Let's name that M, A, E, I. And let's set the weight value at 1 there. All right, and that looks good. Let's come around to the side. And I'm going to press Tab. And let's make sure that we have all the vertices selected. I'm going to press Alt-A and then A to select everything. Then we're going to press R to rotate. And if you can see in the panel to the left there, we'll just put those teeth at a place that looks about right for the pose. Okay, that looks good. And one last thing, we need to set the tongue as well. Let's go back to object mode, select the tongue. Let's set up the shape keys, add in the basis, and then add in the M, A, E, I. And we're going to rotate this one as well. We are going to go into edit mode, and that kind of vanishes the tongue. So let's click on the X-ray button so we can see the inside a little bit more clearly. And once again, we're going to press the R button, just rotate that. Oh, we forgot to set the weight. Let's set that to 1. And we press R and rotate that until the tongue looks like it's in about the right place. And that looks good. And checking the left panel too, so that the full-on face expression looks good. Okay, and you can even move that forward a little bit. And I think that looks good. Turn off the X-ray mode. And there we have our 3 shape keys. Let's go back into object mode. And if we wiggle these back and forth, we can turn on and off the shapes. Now you might be noticing though that these are all independent. We don't want them to move one at a time. We want them to move all together. So how do we do that? Well, we use something called drivers. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick one of these objects to be sort of the main one that's going to drive everything else. The skin's probably the best choice. So we're going to look at the value down here, and we're going to right click and come down here to copy as new driver. And what that does is copy the address of this value property into memory. Then if we come over here and click on the teeth, we can right click on the value and do paste driver. And what that means is that whenever we go to the skin and we wiggle this driver, that is going to in turn, whatever we set to the value on the skin is going to be automatically copied into the shape key down here. And we're going to also want to do that with the tongue. Just right click on top of that and go to paste driver. And now when we go back to the skin, whenever we move this, that moves everything on the inside as well. And if we go into X-ray mode, you can see that a little bit more clearly. Okay, we've created our shape keys. Now let's create bones to drive them. The point of creating bones is to put the ultimate drivers on your rig. This is useful not just because it gives you a single place to access all the information from, but if you're going to be using Blender actions, an action can only target one object at a time. So your ultimately, whatever is driving your animations has to be on the rig, or you won't be able to do a lot of interesting animation tricks. So let's create a first bone driver. Let's reselect the armature and go down here to the viewport display and select in front so that we can see it again. And I'm going to press 1 to go into front mode there. And let's see, let's take that down to median point, so we're scaling about the middle again. And I'm noticing the mouth is open. I think we forgot to close one of the shape keys when we were in the middle of doing all that. So yeah, you see down here, this very last one is still at 1. Let's take that to 0 so that all the shape keys are currently off. Okay, that looks clean. All right, select the rig again, go into edit mode, and I'm going to press Shift A to create a new bone. And let's move this to the side and shrink it down. Okay, and this is going to be a controller bone for the face key, or for the shape key. And so we're going to name it Control _ PH for phoneme. And this is going to be for the AEI section of our card over here. So we're going to be driving that particular shape key. And you see also down here the deform is checked. We do not want that checked. deformed bones are the bones that actually cause the mesh to change. This is not going to change the mesh directly. This is going to call the shape key, which is going to in turn deform the mesh, so this is indirect. So we don't want the deform checked. All right, so now if we go into pose mode, and so the bone is still clicked there. If I move this around, you'll notice in the transform tab on the right, this causes the location of the X and Y to move around a lot. So what we want to do is create a driver from the Y of the transform, which corresponds to moving the bone along the shaft here. We want to create a driver from this value to the skin. So let's do that. I'm going to right click on the Y, and I'm going to copy as new driver. I'm going to go over here to object mode, click on our skin, and down here to the shape keys. Let's go up to the AEI shape key. There it is. And now if I were to change this value right now in the slider, I can still do that freely, but once I paste the shape key, I'm going to right click there and go down to paste driver. Now I can't change this here anymore. Oh, well, I guess I can, but it's now driven by the bone. So if I go down to pose mode, and let's change that to normal space so we are going along the axis of the bone. If I move that, you can see this is now changing the, it's now driving the shape key when I move the bone. And you'll notice I have to move it quite a ways for this to work, because the shape key goes between values of 0 and 1, and the bone takes quite a while to get between 0 and 1 itself. So, and see, if I move it on the X, it doesn't affect anything because we're just using the Y to affect the driver. You can press Alt-G to clear the transform we just did there. Now, this is clearly working, but we'd like this to be a lot more subtle than it currently is. We have to move this bone way too far for the driver to work. So we can fix that. We can click on the skin. Oh, object mode, click on the skin. Come down here, and here's the driver. We're going to right click on the driver and come down here to open drivers editor. And this gives us a fancy user interface that lets us edit the driver. Right now it is just copying it one-to-one. Whatever is on the bone, it gets copied into the weight of the shape key. Well, we would like to change that, so let's change this from average value to scripted expression. And let's take that location, and we're going to multiply it by 10. So now, whatever value is coming in is going to be multiplied by 10 before it's applied to the shape key. And now, if we go back to pose mode, we don't have to move this bone nearly as far to be able to affect our mesh. Okay, I'm going to press Alt-G to clear the transform again. Okay, so this is good, but one drawback right now is it's still possible to move this shape key around to a bunch of places where we don't really want it. It would be nice if we could just clamp it at exactly the range that we want. Well, we can do that with a constraint. So if we come down, we're still in pose mode, come down here to the constraints tab, we're going to add a limit location constraint. And because we don't want to move in the X at all, we want this first of all to be local space. If this is in world space, this is going to be incorrect. And we don't want to move in the X at all, so the minimum and maximum X should both be 0. And same thing for Z, we don't want it moving in Z. And for Y, we do want a minimum Y. And for the maximum Y, remember, we're multiplying this by 10, so we only want that to go up to 0.1. Because 0.1 times 10 in the driver is going to be 1. So now, when we move this up and down, it's going to stop when it hits the limit. In fact, if we try to move it freely, or if we try to move it on the side, it doesn't move at all. And this way we can keep that bone constrained and confined in the space where we want it to be. Okay, now the default bone that we get isn't really the shape that we want, so let's create a custom widget. Let's go back into object mode, Shift A, let's create a plane. Let's go into overhead mode, and let's go from normal back to global because we're not editing bones anymore. Let's move that over here and go into edit mode. Let's add a bunch of divisions. That should be good. And select everything. Let's scale on the y-axis. Okay, and let's take these middle guys. Scale y0. Okay, that is sort of a good slider shape. I think we can use that. Okay, and let's rename that to widget slider shape. Okay, and we're going to move that to its own new collection of widgets. And we're going to hide that because we don't want that interfering with the rest of our scene. So let's just turn that off. But we can still use it for bones. Come back here to pose mode. Our bone is still selected. Click on that little bone thing there. And if you come down here to custom shape and custom object, you can type in the widget and pick the slider. And there is that bone transformed into a slider. And this is going to be so much easier to keep track of the position of where exactly the bone is, because now if we try to move it around, you get that little bar in the middle that shows you exactly how far we have slid. And you don't have to design your sliders to look like this. You can use whatever shape you think is useful, but I like this design, so let's go with this one for now. Now that we've created our first bone, it's not too hard to copy and paste that and fix up some drivers in order to get your second bone. Let's go back into edit mode here and select our control bone. I'm going to press Shift D and then X to keep this constrained to the X-axis to create a new bone. Let's focus on the L mouth position now. Let's rename this guy to Control PH_L. And now what we're going to do is go back into pose mode, grab this guy's Y, which is location Y, and copy as new driver, go back into object mode, click the skin, come down here and select the L, and what we're going to do is we're going to paste the value here, paste driver. Then we're going to right click and edit, and we're going to also change this to a scripted expression, and this one is also going to be multiplied by 10 to give us that scaling factor that we want. And let's see, now when we go back into pose mode, let's cancel out what was left of that expression, and now when this one goes up, we're going to get the L mouth position. And we can switch between them to get the two mouth positions. And this guy, maybe we should move him over a little bit. Go into edit mode. Back in pose mode. Okay, and that is working pretty much the way we want it to work. Now I'm just going to go through quickly and do the same thing with all the other drivers so that we have all of our shape keys hooked up to bones so that we can tweak them in this little user interface we've just set up. Finally, let's create a control bone to clean up all of this. Let's select our rig, and then we can just duplicate one of these guys, and we're going to call him, this is going to be let's call it a mechanism bone. Control panel, just to give ourselves a sort of a box we can put everything in so that it's organized and we can tell what is where. So we're going to select all these guys, and then him, and then Control P, and we're going to keep the offset. And so now this in turn is going to be parented to the head bone. Okay, so now instead of all these bones being parented directly to the head bone, they're now parented to this thing. And we're now going to replace this guy with a control panel widget so that we can give labels to all these things so that we know where they are. Okay, so let's open up a second window here, and let's go into overhead mode, and let's create a plane, and this is going to be our control panel widget. So let's rename that. Okay, and let's move it to the widgets folder. And although let's turn that on because we want to see it. And let's come back up here, go back into pose mode. We don't want this guy to be the slider. We are going to turn that to, we're going to replace you with a different widget, the control panel widget. So you can see that is now a square, and that might be a bit of a too small of a square, so we can come back down to the object and we can edit this until it gets to the size we need. So let's scale that larger, and let's press X and dissolve the delete only faces, so that leaves the wireframe behind. Now we're just going to keep on editing this until we've got sort of a nice, neat control pane sort of surrounding everything to sort of isolate it. And there's a lot of artistic flexibility here. Just do whatever looks neat and is efficient for your workflow. Okay, well, now we have a nice box around everything, but we could also use some labels. So let's hop back into object mode, and let's create some text. And we're going to type in all the different label text we have over there for our different controls. And we'll do this all at once, just so everything is the same size. Okay, that looks good. Okay, that might be a little bit large, but you know what? Let's just combine these two. I'm going to press Control J to merge them into the, oh, I need to convert that to a mesh first. Now I can click that and press Control J. And now those letters have been incorporated into our panel. So let's move these around so that they're in the right place. Actually, let's, maybe we need to shrink, those are about the right size. Okay, so I'm going to grab those guys, move them under that slider. You're in about the right place. In fact, this is going to get a little squished, so let's start with the end. Let's move you guys first. Oops, didn't get everything. Okay, let's go to X-ray mode. Yeah, we got everything. Move them down under that slider. Now everything is nice and labeled, so we know where it is. And last but not least, the QW. And we can even add in some more text for the facial features above. Let's go back into object mode. Let's add another text object. This one is going to be, let's see, eyebrow left, eyebrow right. That might be a little bit large. Let's scale that to half the size. And the one below that is going to be named differently. That's going to be lower. And let's duplicate those guys. And these guys are going to be on the right side. So let's end those with .r. Just the one. Okay. Convert these guys to meshes. And then let's join with our control. And now we can just position them into the right place so that our sliders are labeled. One more thing we can do is add a vertical axis line to our sliders so it's a little bit more obvious where their start and end points are. That is just going to be a simple, we can start with a simple plain object. And I think that by default that should be fine. Let's join it with our panel there. And let's also delete the faces. Okay, so it's got a nice rectangle there. So let's align the bottom with the bottom of our slider. And let's go back into pose mode. Well, let's select the armature first and then go into pose mode. And then let's move that guy up to the maximum. So that is as far as we want to go up. So let's click on, or let's go back to our control shape. So the minimum is in the right place. Now let's move the maximum to right about there. Okay, good enough. And let's squish these into the middle so it looks a little bit more rectangular. Okay, there is going to be our slider middle bar right there. So we're just going to copy and paste these to the other widgets so that everything lines up. Okay, that should be fine. And you know what? We don't really need the insides of those letters too. I think we can get rid of them. So let's select everything and delete only faces. So that should be a little bit more clear. Okay, and there is our control panel done. And this is a little bit sloppy, but I think you get the right idea here. And actually, one of the nice things about doing it this way, because all of these slider controls, if we select the rig again, are parented to that mechanism object, like here. The nice thing about that is if you go into pose mode, it's actually possible to select the entire slider system at once and then just scale it down and move it around. And actually we should probably get rid of that constraint limit on the panel, on the control panel itself. We want those on the sliders, not on the control panel. But anyway, as I was saying, we can now move these around and shrink it down to something more reasonable size, and then we can click the sliders and they still all work. And that is how you get a working bone driver system for your rig. Now that we have our control panel set up, we can go on and make a pose library. Now, this might not be strictly necessary for your project, but pose libraries can be a good way to organize assets, and third-party software such as Lipsyncers might need them as well. So let's begin by creating a new layout panel, just to give ourselves a new workspace because our current layout panel is a little bit cluttered. And let's turn off the widgets collection, just so we don't have to keep seeing that. And let's turn on the screencast keys so you can see what I'm doing here. There we go, reinitialize that. Okay, let's give ourselves a side panel and set this to the asset browser. And let's bring up another view here. Let's go into 3D viewport, just so we can get a nice close-up on our face so we can see what's going on. There we go, and let's turn off all those bones so that we can see it nicely and clearly. Okay, and one more thing, let's bring up the action editor so we can see what's going on action-wise. Select the dope sheet and then set this drop down to action editor. Okay, a couple of more things. Let's come back over here to the action editor. Let's click on current file so we only see the actions in the current file. And let's move in a little bit closer over here. Okay, and let's see. So we want to make this not selectable. Let's actually bring that in a little bit closer to our face so that it is easily accessible. But we also want to turn this off because we don't want to keep accidentally selecting the control panel when we're actually trying to select these little slider bones over here. So click on the control panel bone, come over here to the outliner, press period, and let's open that up a little bit. And we're going to click the funnel and click on the arrow here. Now this is the selectable flag. And if we click on that, then that turns off selectability. So if we click on one bone and then click on the panel again, it's not going to be selected unless we undo turning off that flag there. One last thing to do, we need to move the camera so that we have a nice good view of the face. So I'm going to press 0 to go into the camera mode, and we're going to come down here and select the view tab and select lock camera to viewport. And now we're just going to move in so we have a nice tight close-up of the face here, so we can easily see what the lips are doing. Okay, and remember to unclick camera to view so that we don't accidentally move the camera. One more thing, let's make sure that our lips are in neutral. So we're going to press 1 to go into front view, and we're going to select all the bones here in our facial drivers, and I'm going to press Alt-G, which just sets the transforms of all of those to 0. All right, now we're ready to go on to the next phase where we actually start making the poses, the facial poses. All right, let's start by creating a rest pose. In order to do that, we're just going to select all of these phoneme bones at the bottom of our control, and I'm going to press I, and that is going to keyframe each one of those. And if you look down here in our action editor, you can see we have each one of the control bones listed here, and if you open them up, you can see that we keyframed the location, the rotation, and the scale of all of them. Which might be a little bit of overkill, but better safe than sorry, especially when you're doing pose animation. So this is good for our first pose. Now let's send that to the pose library by clicking Create Pose Asset. And you can see there's a preview of our pose right there, and if we press the letter N key and open this up a little bit, we can rename that pose to rest, because this is going to be the rest position of our mouth. Okay, there's the first pose done. Now you'll notice that the rest action is still loaded down here in our action editor, which can cause a problem when we go to create our next pose. So in order to avoid poses interfering with each other, we're just going to press the X key here. Now that didn't delete it, that just unlinked it from our armature, which is what we wanted. So now we can go in and create the next pose. Let's click on the AEI slider, press the G key, and move that all the way up. And now we can shift select the rest of these bones, and we're going to press I to create a new pose for our to create a new keyframe for our new pose. Now we're going to click Create Pose Asset to move that over to the asset library, and we're going to name that AEI to be the name of our new pose. And one more, let's do the L. Let's see, move back a little bit over there. All these bones are selected. We're going to press Alt-G to clear the transform. Then select the L bone, press G, move that up. Shift select all these other bones. And remember to clear the action editor by pressing the X here. And we're going to press I to create that new keyframe. And when we go to Create Pose Asset, we now have that L pose in our library. Let's rename it to L. And let's click here to clear it from the action editor. Now, the nice thing about having these in the pose library is we can now switch between them. If all these bones are selected and we double click on the pose, we will automatically jump to that pose, which is going to be a lot easier, which can make things a lot easier and also allow you to do lots of automation things. If we want to add another pose to our pose library, let's say we want to move up the QW, I'm going to make sure all these bones are selected, press Alt-G to clear them, click on QW, press G to move that up, shift to select these all again, press I to keyframe all of that, and we're going to create a pose asset by clicking there, and let's set that to QW. Let's clear the pose out of, or let's clear the action out of our action editor, and now we have a new member of our pose library. So I'm now going to go through quickly and set up the rest of these. We're going to fast forward this bit, but I'm basically doing what I just showed you over and over again. All right, now that we've got all that setup done, let's create an animation. Let's go over here to the animation tab, and we're going to bring in our audio track for lip syncing. Just going to open up the bottom section here and drag in an extra window, set this to the video sequencer. And before I do that, let me just turn on screencast keys quickly. Come down here, screencast keys, toggle that. Okay, now they're working again. And let's turn this to the file browser. And we'll drag in our audio track and set that back to 3D. Okay, now if we play this, we can hear what our audio sounds like.
The Matrix by Amy Lowell. Read by Betsy Bush for LibriVox.org.
Okay, we're not going to need that first part, so we'll put the playhead right there, select the clip, and press K. That's going to make a cut in the clip. Then we'll just delete this first section, and we'll grab the rest of this and drag it down to the side. Let's put that at frame 1 to start with. And we're also going to want to set the end frame. Now we could just type that in to the end box down there. We could just type it in here, but we can also put the playhead here and then press Control End, and that will automatically fill in the end with wherever the playhead happens to be. So this should be fine. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to change the playback settings. We're going to go from play every frame to sync to audio. This just makes it a little bit more efficient when we're doing playback. It's going to drop frames that the computer isn't fast enough to draw. And we're also going to check on scrubbing. So now, when we move the playhead around, we're going to hear just a fraction of the syllable of where the playhead happens to be. Okay, and let's also zoom in to our model so we can get a good idea of what's going on. Just a nice close-up view so we can see clearly. And if we select on our bones, we can put those up and down. Looks like one of these is on. Yes. Let's just clear all our bones. Press Alt-G to set all those back to 0. And now if we select a bone and wiggle it off and on, that will engage it. All right, and this should all be good for starting our lip sync. Okay, one more thing, let's zoom in on our waveform a little bit so that it's easier to see. We can play with that slider over there. God damn it. One more bit of setup, let's bring in our pose library. So let's shrink that down, and this one too. And let's open that up and set you over here to Asset Browser, and just switch that to the current file so we can see all the poses we just made. And we can even shrink that down a little bit. Okay. Now, when we select poses in the pose library, that will affect which of these bones is active, what position they're in. So if I click on the QW pose, you can see the QW bone just shot up to the top there. The MP will activate that bone. The O bone will, or the O pose will activate the O bone. And if we want to bring this back to a resting neutral pose, we can double click on the rest, which will set these all back to the 0 positions. And this is a quick way to get this whole group of bones to be the particular mouth pose that you want for the animation. Okay, let's keyframe the first word. Let's move the playhead to where we want to start, and we can actually press Control-T so we can see the keyframes rather than the time in seconds. And make sure all these bones are selected, And we're going to keep the mouse in this part of the window and press I. And when we do that, if you look down here in the dope sheet, we've just keyframed our rest position for all of these. Now, if we play back the audio down here, we can hear our first word.
Goated and
Okay, this first section here is goated. So let's put the playhead there and double click on CDG and press I to keyframe that. And see that that just appeared down there in the dope sheet. Let's zoom in a little bit so we can see it a little bit closer. And we got a bit of an O there, so let's change that. Double click on there to get the O, press I to keyframe again. And down here we're in a D, so let's double click on that to get our D mouth pose. Press I to keyframe again. And I guess we can put an E right about there. And I'd keyframe that. And the word finishes right about there, so let's go back to a rest. Double click on that to keyframe that in, and one more to keyframe that last pose. This is looking a little bit closer. Let's just scoot that over a little bit. I'm going to press the G key. And yeah, you click the top one to select the entire column, and then you can press the G key to move it over. And let's just zoom in a little bit more. And so there are our keyframes. Let's play it back and see if it looks good.
goated and
That looks reasonable.
goated and goated and goated
All right, and now let's move on to the second word, the word and.
and her and her.
Okay, so and is just this little lump right here. So we should still be in the rest position. So let's just keyframe what we have here. So this whole section is going to go from arrest to arrest. And then we jump into an A. So let's put in an A symbol there. Press I to keyframe that. And maybe let's give this a little bit more space. Let's move that keyframe over a bit. We sort of have an ND sound here, so let's keyframe that. Where's the N? Right there. Double click the N, I to keyframe, and back to rest. So let's double click rest, and there is the word and. Play this back.
Goated and harassed.
Okay, and finally harassed. Okay, that starts right about there. So I don't think we have an H sound, but we can sort of use this one as sort of a substitute. Let's press I to keyframe that. Oh, that was way too far down. Let's click that dot to get the column and press G to move it over. Whoops. Okay, there we go. Play that back. Okay, we've got a bit of an A sound right there. Let's move that over a little bit more. Let's get our A in there, keyframe that. Yeah, let's... Okay, we have an S there, so let's... I think this one is also an S, although it's not listed there, so keyframe that. Oh no, the S is way over here. Let's move that down. Okay, the A should be more over there. Got an R sound. I think this one is also R. So let's keyframe that. Going to end with a T sound there, so let's get the TH going. For a stop, there it is. And then we move into a rest. So let's go back to the rest position. Keyframe that, and let's see, how does that look?
Harassed in. Harassed in.
We might want to put something in the middle there. Move that back a bit. And let's put an E sound in there.
Harassed in the.
Anyway, this is where the artistic part comes in over the technological part, and
Harassed in.
it's just about picking what you think are the correct
Harassed in.
phonemes, the correct mouth shapes, and just keyframing them in the right position so that the lips that you see match up with the audio in the in your audio track. So we're just going to go through and do this for the rest of the bones, and once you're done with all of that, your lip sync is done. And that is how you use shape keys to create lip syncs in Blender. Finally, you can save yourself a lot of work by using an add-on in order to do a lot of the lip sync keyframing automatically. I'm using Parrot, which is an add-on I developed myself, so you can buy that at the Blender Market if you'd like to have it yourself. You can see that I've selected it in the Parrot Lip Sync tab in the side here, and what I'm going to do is press the Reload Phoneme Table just to make sure the phoneme table is loaded. Then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to load one of these mouth pose actions that we created for each of the slots here. There aren't too many, CDG. And the reason why I chose these names for the different actions is to line them up with the library, although you can modify the table and use whatever phonemes you want to. This is all very flexible and editable. And once this is all filled out, let's get the U right at the bottom there. QW, and finally our rest position. Okay, the table is all filled out now. Next, we're going to render this to an NLA track in order to synchronize the, in order that we can place the action in the timeline so that it is correctly positioned. Because if you remember, we trimmed the start and the end of this audio clip a little bit, so the bounds of the full audio clip don't exactly match where they are laid out in the track editor. So let's switch this over to the NLA editor, and now we're going to select our skeleton, and actually we're going to click this little eyedropper tool and select the skeleton, the armature. So now it is loaded into this slot here, and we can even toggle the system console so that we can see what happens when we render it out. Okay, everything is now ready. We're going to press the render lip sync to object NLA, and now everything is going to run. And once this is all done, we should have our NLA object in our NLA editor area, and when we play it, that should synchronize with everything we've done. And this can save a lot of time when you have a long lip sync to do. This lip sync we have below is only 1 minute long, And just you saw me earlier go through and do it all by hand, and that was, I mean, I did rush through it, but even so, it took a long time. And this is just a way to improve your accuracy and get it done so much faster. And you can see we're already done. There is the NLA strip all set up. So if we rewind, we can play it and see what the final lip sync looks like.
Goaded and harassed in the factory that tears our life up into bits of days, ticked off upon a clock which never stays, shredding our portion of eternity. We break away at last and steal the key.
All right, and that is how it works. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something about how to lip sync with shape keys. It is a little bit more work than lip syncing with bones, but you can have so much more control over the final results. In any case, I'm going to leave you with some rendered animations of the lip syncs that we created, and I hope you enjoyed this. Please check out my Parrot Lipsync plugin. It can save you a lot of work if you're doing a lot of lip syncing, but you can also do it by hand if you want it to do that way too. In any case, thanks for watching, and until next time, happy animating.
Goaded and harassed in the factory that tears our life up into bits of days, ticked off upon a clock which never stays, shredding our portion of eternity. We break away at last and steal the key which hides a world empty of hours. Ways of space unroll, and heaven overlays the leafy, sunlit earth of fantasy. Beyond the ilex shadow glares the sun, scorching against the blue flame of the sky. Brown lily pads lie heavy and supine within a granite basin. Under one, the bronze gold glimmer of a carp. And I reach out my hand and pluck a nectarine.